Hello and welcome to the Global Conversation, coming to you from Strasbourg. My guest today is Roberta Metsola, the President of the European Parliament. President Roberta Metsola, thank you so much for being our guest on the Global Conversation. They say when you have small children, the days are very, very long, but the years are short. Do you have the same feeling, perhaps, after 2.5 years as President of the European Parliament?
Well, I have 4 children. Some of them are smaller than others, and I would absolutely agree. If somebody had told me at the beginning of the 2.5 years what these 2 years were going to look like, I would never have been able to predict how much we managed to achieve, but also how many crises and challenges we've had to overcome and to handle.
And on those achievements, what stood out for you? What was your highlight? What are you most proud of?
Well, in terms of an institutional perspective, we have managed to push through a huge amount of reforms, perhaps also to address challenges that we were met with face head on in terms of how this Parliament will come back in July. I am extremely proud of those reforms, of the effectiveness of the way that legislation will be able to run through this Parliament more smoothly. From a legislative perspective, I would say the Migration Pact, which we thought would not see the light of day after almost a decade of being blocked, but we managed to push it through with a sometimes narrow but much needed majority in this House.
It was hailed indeed as an achievement, wasn't it, the Migration Pact by you after so many years, but nobody really likes it.
Well, I would say that the extremists don't like it on both sides of the spectrum. Why? Because there is a balanced package, which is solidarity at its focus, reinforcement of external borders, working on returns. Still a lot to do on how we deal with third countries, that we talk to our neighbouring countries not only about migration but also about investment, development and possibility, and that we never forget that at the very centre of this package are human beings.
Well, indeed, do migrants like the package, do you think?
Well, we have to make sure it works for everybody, and that if there is somebody who is looking for a future because there's none at home, then Europe will be able to look at that person rather than squabble between the countries and almost face a certain death in the Mediterranean.
And just on that note as well, you managed putting out a lot of crises here as well. That was, of course, your job. You did, of course, have last winter that corruption scandal where allegedly some of your members were under the influence of certain governments. How did it feel like when you got that phone call from the authorities to have to go to investigate, to go to the home of one of your vice presidents of the European Parliament, Eva Kaili?
Actually, I went to the home of a Belgian member of the European Parliament. This was a specific, I would say, gut punch on the 9th of December 2022. Now, we had a choice that day. Either we say that this is something that would happen in any parliament, or that we look at the party political colour, or that we look at the country involved. But I refused to do that. I said, this House needs to move on. This House needs to make sure that if something like this had to happen again, then firewalls would be put in place and alarm bells would be sounded. It took a very long time, both to go through the motions of what needed to be done. This was, I would say, unprecedented and also unexpected. But once we did that, we realized as a House that we need to indeed reform in the way we do things. Status quo was always better. Pushing through that was very hard. But there was no doubt, and here I'm proud of the response of the members when they said, you know, we do not want this mandate, which is huge in terms of its impact, to be tarnished by the alleged actions of a small number. And I think that's where we can say we are today.
I remember very well you called it an attack on the European Parliament. And just moving from that scandal to another, you have just a couple of weeks before the EU elections, the so-called Russiagate, where some of your members here have allegedly been under the influence from people close to the Kremlin in return for money to therefore spread positive messaging about Russia. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, first of all, what I know for now, until now, we have something that we have been discussing, and I have been discussing this with prime ministers for many months now. We've been alerted when we looked at national elections that there would be also a certain amount of unprecedented disinformation, Russian disinformation, in some countries more than others. We continue to wait for information to be received from national authorities because this would require any waiver of immunity being adopted by this House. Investigations that would need to take place, like had happened in the past, that would require national authorities to ask. We're waiting for that, and when that happens, we will do our job as we've always done.
So you don't know how many MEPs could be involved, and some could be potentially running for office. They want to sit again in this chamber.
So far, no names have been communicated to us, and we are waiting. We are waiting.
And meanwhile, of course, as I said, these elections are coming up. Why should people vote? I mean, I know in this Parliament, everyone will be voting. Everyone's excited about the elections. But why should our viewers care?
Well, look at the chairs. They're empty, but in a few minutes they will be filled with 705 today, 720 in just over a month's time, where those 720 are going to be taking decisions for you. Now, you have a choice. You either decide who you want to sit in these chairs, or you let others decide for you. Those people sitting there from your country are going to be your country's ambassadors. They're going to be taking decisions that affect your everyday life, whether it is on decisions to do with climate, on social. We adopt, for example, the Violence Against Women Directive, a very, very big, let's say, pillar of legislation that we've been working on for many, many years. This is something you can affect with your vote every 5 years. Don't miss out on that opportunity.
And you're on TikTok, right? I've seen you've joined TikTok.
Just recently, yes. My kids are not so happy, going back to the first question.
How is it going for you? Are you managing to get the message out to the people and bring this Parliament that feels so abstract closer to the people?
Well, there was a choice to be made. Do we go on to a social media platform that I say my children had been saying for a very long time, please don't go on it, Mum, you know, or not? 4 countries vote at the age of 16. 1 country will vote at the age of 17. We have seen, and this is what I've done, going from one country to another, asking young people, where do you get your news? What I don't want is those young people to get their news potentially from propaganda or misinformation sources. So we said, let's get on there, let's get our message through, and hopefully once those kids are scrolling through, they get something that says, oh, I like this, I'll go vote.
OK, you pique their curiosity. And what about you? What's your future looking like? Would you like one day to be the President of the European Commission or to run your country?
Well, this has been a privilege of a lifetime to be able to have this responsibility that my colleagues have entrusted to me in the past 2.5 years. I'm now working pretty hard back home because I need to run for my seat. And that's my aim in order to be elected once again to represent the citizens of Malta and Gozo.
And which elections are more important? The ones taking place in June in Europe or the ones taking place on the other side of the pond in November?
Well, all democracies deserve a good election and a good campaign. There are more people in the world who can't choose their leaders than there are who can. So we will be very much looking to the November elections. But first we have pretty big ones here. And I'm hoping that those big ones will return a group of members who will come here and say we want to work for more Europe. We want to work for better lives of our citizens.
Let's see, we certainly report on it all. Roberta Metsola, President of the European Parliament, thank you so much for being our guest on the Global Conversation.
Thank you.